The vast northern plains stretched endlessly, a sea of rolling grassland under an open sky so immense it seemed to touch the heavens. Here, among the shimmering grasses swaying in the summer breeze, the Assiniboine tribe had thrived for generations. Their connection to the land was not merely physical, it was spiritual, a bond forged through centuries of harmony with the earth's rhythms and the creatures that roamed it. Ahote was a young hunter of the Assiniboine, known among his people for his sharp instincts and deep reverence for nature. His name, meaning restless one, suited him well, ever curious. He had spent his childhood listening to the elders' stories of the spirits that dwelled in the land, the sky, and the waters. His favorite storyteller was his grandmother, Unk'itehi, a tribal elder who carried the wisdom of generations in her gentle voice. Unk'itehi often spoke of Unk'itehi, the earth spirit, a being both revered and feared. According to legend, Unk'itehi was the protector of balance, watching over the plains and its inhabitants. But when the balance was disturbed, when greed or neglect took hold, the spirit would rise to remind humanity of their duty to the earth. Her tales painted vivid images in Ahote's mind: glowing bison herds that appeared in the moonlight, rivers that whispered secrets, and storms that carried the earth spirit's anger. Ahote's life, like that of the other young men, was defined by the hunt. The bison were their lifeblood, providing food, clothing, tools, and shelter. But to the Assiniboine, the hunt was more than survival, it was a sacred act, a ceremony of gratitude to the spirits for their blessings. Before every hunt, the tribe would gather in the sacred circle, their faces painted with earthy pigments, their voices rising in chants that seemed to weave with the wind itself. Yet, the land had grown quiet in recent years. The bison herds, once so plentiful that the earth trembled beneath their stampedes, had become elusive. The rivers ran slower, and the grasses, once lush and green, turned brittle under the sun's unrelenting gaze. The elders whispered that something was amiss, that the spirits were displeased. Ahote noticed the changes too. On his hunts, the silence of the plains felt heavier, as if the land itself held its breath. Birds no longer sang in the mornings, and the howls of wolves at night seemed mournful rather than menacing. Even Unk'itehi, whose faith in the spirits was unwavering, seemed troubled. She had begun spending more time in the sacred circle, her chants more fervent, her offerings more abundant. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in fiery hues, Unk'itehi called Ahote to her side. They sat together by the fire, its warm glow casting flickering shadows on her weathered face. She held a small bundle wrapped in deerskin, the medicine pouch she had carried since her youth. "Ahote," she began, her voice low and steady. "Our people stand at a crossroads. The spirits have been silent, but the silence speaks louder than words. Unk'itehi watches us, and I fear we have forgotten our place in the balance of the world." Ahote frowned, his dark eyes reflecting the firelight. "But grandmother, we still honor the hunt, and we give thanks to the spirits. What have we done to anger Unk'itehi?" Unk'itehi sighed, her gaze distant. "It is not what we have done, but what we have failed to do. The world changes, and we have grown careless. The drought, the vanishing herds, they are warnings. And now, I have seen a vision." She unwrapped the medicine pouch, revealing a collection of sacred items: a feather from an eagle, a stone smoothed by the river, and a shard of bison bone. Her hands trembled slightly as she placed them on the ground between them. "In my vision," she continued, "the plains were consumed by fire, the bison turned to ash, and the rivers dried to dust. But in the heart of the Badlands, a light shone, a beacon of hope. Unk'itehi spoke to me, though not in words. The spirit called for a champion, one who would journey to the sacred place and seek the balance we have lost." Ahote's heart quickened. He had heard of the Badlands, a desolate, otherworldly landscape of jagged rocks and deep ravines. It was said to be a place where the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds was thin. a realm where only the bravest dared to tread. "Grandmother," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "you believe I am this champion?" Wiaka met his gaze. Her eyes filled with both pride and sorrow. "The spirits have chosen you. Ahote, you carry the fire of youth and the wisdom of our ancestors. This journey will test you in ways you cannot imagine. But it is your destiny." Ahote felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. He was no stranger to challenges. He had faced wolves in the wild and survived harsh winters, but this was different. The thought of confronting Unk'itehi filled him with both awe and fear. "I will go," he said finally, his voice firm, "for the tribe, for the land, and for the spirits." Wiaka nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and sadness. She placed the medicine pouch in his hands, her touch lingering as if to pass on a fragment of her strength. "Take this. It will guide you and protect you. But remember, the greatest strength lies not in the body, but in the spirit." As the fire burned low, Ahote stared into the embers, his mind swirling with thoughts of the journey ahead. The land was vast, the spirits mysterious, and the task daunting. Yet, deep within him, a flame of determination burned. He would face whatever trials awaited him, for the sake of his people and the sacred bond they shared with the earth. Little did Ahote know, his journey would take him not only across the plains but into the heart of the spirit world itself, a place where the lines between life and legend blurred, and where his courage would be tested in ways beyond his comprehension. The winds whispered through the grasses, carrying the echoes of a destiny that had been set in motion long before his time. The drought had stretched for weeks, the sun blazing relentlessly over the plains. The once vibrant grasses wilted under its glare, their golden hues fading to a brittle brown. The rivers ran shallow, their once proud currents reduced to trickling whispers, and the bison, lifeblood of the Assiniboine, were nowhere to be found. The tribe had grown restless, their spirits weighed down by hunger and uncertainty. The elders convened often, their furrowed brows and hushed voices signaling the gravity of the situation. Ahote, now preparing for his journey, could feel the tribe's unease pressing down like the heavy summer heat. He spent hours with Wiaka, listening to her chants and helping her prepare offerings to the spirits. The medicine pouch she had given him rarely left his side, its weight a constant reminder of the task ahead. One evening, as the sky turned a deep indigo and the first stars began to emerge, the tribal council gathered around a roaring fire. The air was thick with the scent of burning sage, and the rhythmic beat of a drum echoed across the plains. Wiaka stepped forward, her frail figure illuminated by the flames. She raised her arms, her voice steady despite her age. "My people," she began, "the spirits are restless, and the land cries out for balance. I have seen a vision, a warning from Unk'itehi. The earth spirit tests us, but it also offers a path to redemption." The gathered crowd murmured, their faces a mixture of fear and hope. Wiaka continued, her voice rising above the whispers. "Ahote, my grandson, has been chosen to undertake this journey. He will travel to the sacred Badlands, where the spirit's voice echoes loudest. There, he will seek forgiveness and guidance for our tribe." All eyes turned to Ahote, who stepped forward hesitantly. His heart pounded, but he kept his chin high, meeting the gaze of his people. The weight of their expectations pressed down on him, but he knew there was no turning back. "I will go," he said, his voice firm, "for the tribe, for the land, and for the spirits." That night, the tribe held a ceremony to bless Ahote's journey. The air buzzed with energy as the people sang, danced, and prayed. Wiaka painted symbols of protection on his face. Using a mixture of ash and clay, she placed a single eagle feather in his hair, a symbol of courage and connection to the Great Spirit. Before the ceremony ended, Wiaka called Ahote aside. Her expression was grave, her voice low. "Ahote, the path ahead is fraught with danger. You will face not only the physical trials of the Badlands but the spirit's test of your heart and soul. Trust in the pouch. But more importantly, trust in yourself. Ahote nodded, his resolve firm despite the flicker of doubt in his heart. He felt the weight of the feather in his hair, the cool touch of the painted symbols on his skin, and the warmth of his grandmother's faith in him. With these, he set out the next morning, the rising sun casting long shadows over the plains. The first days of his journey were uneventful but grueling. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the dry air sapped his strength. He followed the distant outline of the Badlands, their jagged peaks a stark contrast against the horizon. Each night, he lit a small fire and offered prayers to the spirits, his chants echoing into the quiet wilderness. But as he drew closer to his destination, the land began to change. The grasses grew sparse, giving way to rocky terrain. The air grew still, heavy with an unspoken tension. Ahote felt as though he was being watched, though he saw no sign of other life. One night, as he rested beneath a crescent moon, a strange sound woke him. It was faint at first, a low hum that seemed to rise from the earth itself. He sat up, gripping his bow tightly, his eyes scanning the darkness. The hum grew louder, transforming into a deep, resonant voice that filled the air. "Why do you come, child of the plains?" The voice boomed, as if the earth itself were speaking. Ahote's heart raced, but he forced himself to stand, his bow still in hand. "I come to seek guidance," he said, his voice steady despite his fear. "The earth spirit has called me, and I must answer." The voice fell silent, replaced by a chilling wind that swept through the rocks. When it subsided, Ahote saw something that made his breath catch: a massive bison, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light, standing atop a nearby ridge. His presence was both majestic and terrifying, a manifestation of the very spirit he sought. The bison stared at him for a long moment before turning and vanishing into the shadows. Ahote felt a strange pull, as if the spirit was beckoning him forward. He gathered his belongings and continued, the encounter leaving him both shaken and determined. The next day, the terrain grew even harsher. The ground cracked under his feet, and jagged rocks jutted out at odd angles. The air grew hotter, oppressive, as if the land itself were testing his endurance. Yet, despite the physical challenges, Ahote felt an inexplicable energy guiding him forward. As night fell, he reached the outskirts of the Badlands. The landscape was like nothing he had ever seen, a labyrinth of deep ravines, towering spires, and crumbling cliffs bathed in the pale light of the moon. The air was eerily still, as if the land was holding its breath. Ahote knelt and offered another prayer, his voice breaking the silence. He felt the pouch at his side grow warm, a subtle but comforting reminder of Wiyaka's blessings. He knew the true test was about to begin, but he also knew there was no turning back. Somewhere in the depths of the Badlands, Unk'itehi waited. The spirit's presence loomed over the land, the silence a challenge, its whispers a call. Ahote steeled himself, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The Badlands rose before Ahote like the bones of the earth, a jagged and unforgiving landscape that seemed to stretch endlessly under the pale dawn light. The air was thick and still, carrying the faint scent of dry earth and stone. This was no ordinary land, it was sacred, a realm where the physical and spiritual worlds converged. Every step Ahote took felt like an intrusion, yet also like a calling. Clutching the medicine pouch close to his side, he began his descent into the labyrinth of crags and gullies. The rocky ground crunched beneath his moccasins, and the walls of the ravines seemed to close in, muffling all sound except the occasional whisper of the wind. Shadows danced across the cliffs, their shapes twisting into forms that seemed almost alive. Ahote pressed on, his senses sharp. The Badlands were not only a spiritual place but a dangerous one. Stories from the elders spoke of treacherous terrain and strange occurrences, vanishing landmarks, phantom figures, and sudden storms that seemed to come from nowhere. Each tale carried a warning. Those who entered unprepared risked losing themselves, both body and soul. The first sign came at midday, as Ahote paused to drink from his water skin. He heard the faint sound of hoofbeats. His heart quickened. Could it be a bison? He crouched low, scanning the horizon. The sound grew louder, rhythmic and steady, yet there was no sign of movement. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the sound ceased. Ahote frowned, his grip tightening on his bow. He knew better than to dismiss such occurrences as mere tricks of the wind. The spirits of the Badlands were known to test travelers, probing their fears and resolve. He whispered a prayer to Unk'itehi, asking for guidance, before continuing on his way. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ahote encountered his first true challenge. The path before him ended abruptly at a wide chasm, its depths shrouded in shadow. On the far side, the path continued, winding upward toward what appeared to be a circle of stones atop a plateau. Ahote's breath caught. Unk'itehi had spoken of such a place, a sacred stone circle where the earth spirit's presence was strongest. But to reach it, he would have to cross the chasm. There was no bridge, no visible means of passage. Only the yawning void stretched between him and his destination. As he stood there, a voice echoed in his mind, low and resonant. "Do you trust the earth to carry you?" Ahote froze, his heart pounding. The voice was not his own, nor was it one he recognized. It seemed to come from the very land beneath his feet. He closed his eyes, breathing deeply to steady himself. The medicine pouch felt warm against his side, a comforting presence. When he opened his eyes, he saw something that hadn't been there before. A narrow strip of rock spanning the chasm, barely wide enough for a single step. It looked fragile, almost impossibly so, but it was the only way forward. Ahote hesitated. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to find another path. But deep down, he knew this was part of the test. Unk'itehi was watching, gauging his faith and courage. He stepped onto the bridge, his movements slow and deliberate. The rock felt solid beneath his feet, but the drop on either side was dizzying. One misstep could mean death. Halfway across, the wind picked up, howling through the chasm and threatening to unbalance him. Ahote crouched low, gripping the edges of the bridge with his hands. He whispered a prayer, his voice barely audible over the wind. The medicine pouch seemed to hum against his side, its warmth spreading through him like a protective shield. When he finally reached the other side, he collapsed to his knees, his body trembling with relief and exhaustion. He offered a prayer of thanks before rising to his feet. The stone circle was close now, its weathered pillars silhouetted against the darkening sky. As he approached, he noticed strange markings etched into the stones, symbols and patterns that seemed to shift and glow faintly in the fading light. The air around the circle was thick with energy, a tangible force that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He stepped into the circle and immediately felt a change. The air grew colder, and the world seemed to fall silent. The wind died, the distant chirps of crickets ceased, and even the sound of his own breathing seemed muted. It was as if the land itself was holding its breath. At the center of the circle lay a large, flat stone, its surface polished smooth. Ahote approached cautiously, his eyes scanning for any sign of movement. As he reached the stone, he noticed something extraordinary. Reflected in its surface was not his own face, but the visage of a massive bison with glowing eyes. The voice returned, louder and more commanding. "Why have you come, child of the plains?" Ahote swallowed hard, his throat dry. He placed the medicine pouch on the stone and knelt, bowing his head. "I come to seek forgiveness and guidance. Earth Spirit, my people have lost their way, and the balance has been broken. I wish to restore it." The bison's reflection seemed to shift, its eyes narrowing as if weighing his words. "Words are easy to speak, but actions carry weight. Are you prepared to face the truth of your heart and the trials of the land?" Yes, Ahote replied, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his core. I will face whatever is asked of me. The bison's reflection vanished, replaced by swirling patterns of light and shadow. The air around Ahote grew heavy, pressing down on him like an unseen force. He felt his vision blur, the world around him dissolving into darkness. When the darkness lifted, he found himself standing in a strange, otherworldly landscape. The ground was covered in shimmering silver grass, and the sky above was a kaleidoscope of colors that shifted and swirled like a living painting. In the distance, he saw the silhouette of the glowing-eyed bison, waiting for him. Ahote took a deep breath and stepped forward, knowing that the true test was about to begin. The journey to the Badlands had been only the beginning. Now, he would have to prove his worth to Unk'itehi, not with words, but with courage, wisdom, and humility. Ahote stood frozen, staring at the colossal bison with glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through his very soul. The spirit creature was unlike anything he had ever seen, a being of immense power and ancient wisdom. Its massive frame shimmered with an ethereal glow, as though it was both part of this world and something beyond it. The silver grass beneath his feet seemed to ripple in response to the bison's presence, as if the land itself acknowledged the spirit's authority. You seek forgiveness and guidance, the bison's voice rumbled, low and resonant, echoing through the strange landscape. But words alone are not enough. The balance has been broken, and sacrifices must be made. Are you prepared to face the truths you hide from yourself, and to give what is required? Ahote swallowed hard, his heart pounding. He could feel the weight of the spirit's gaze, and the enormity of the task ahead pressed down on him. I am prepared, he said, his voice steady despite the fear that churned within him. The bison's glowing eyes narrowed, and the ground beneath Ahote's feet began to shift. The silver grass faded away, replaced by a barren, cracked landscape. The vibrant sky dimmed to a dull gray, and the air grew heavy with an oppressive silence. In the distance, Ahote saw 3 paths branching out from where he stood, each shrouded in mist. Choose, the bison commanded. Each path leads to a trial, and each trial will reveal a truth. You must face them all to earn my forgiveness. Ahote hesitated, his gaze flickering between the 3 paths. Each one seemed equally foreboding, their destinations hidden by the swirling mist. He gripped the medicine pouch tightly, drawing strength from its warmth, and stepped toward the path on the left. The trial of fear. The air grew colder as Ahote walked, his breath forming wisps of vapor in the dim light. The path led to a narrow canyon, its walls towering high on either side. Shadows danced along the rocks, their shapes twisting into forms that seemed almost alive. As he ventured deeper, the shadows began to coalesce, forming into figures, wolves with glowing red eyes, their snarls echoing through the canyon. Ahote's pulse quickened. The wolves moved closer, their teeth bared, their growls growing louder. His first instinct was to reach for his bow, but as his hand moved, the bison's voice echoed in his mind. Fear can drive you to act, but it can also blind you. Do not fight what you do not understand. He took a deep breath, lowering his bow. The wolves circled him, their eyes locked on his. Ahote knelt on the ground, bowing his head. I will not fight you, he said, his voice steady. If I am to prove my worth, it will not be through violence. The wolves paused, their growls subsiding. One by one, they began to dissolve into mist, their forms dissipating into the air. The canyon grew silent once more, and Ahote felt a strange sense of calm wash over him. He had faced his fear, and the path ahead became clear. The trial of loss. The second path led Ahote to a vast, empty plain. The land was desolate, the soil cracked and dry, and the sky above was a dull, lifeless gray. In the distance, he saw a solitary figure standing with their back to him. As he approached, his breath caught. The figure was Wiaka, her familiar silhouette unmistakable. Grandmother, Ahote called out, his voice trembling. Wiaka turned to face him, her expression calm but sorrowful. Ahote, she said, her voice soft, you have come far, but the greatest test lies within yourself. Before he could respond, the ground beneath her feet began to crack. Shadows rose from the earth, wrapping around her like tendrils. She extended a hand toward him, her eyes pleading. You must let go, my child. Only then can you truly understand the balance. Ahote's heart clenched. He wanted to run to her, to pull her free. But the bison's voice echoed once more. The balance demands sacrifice. To hold on to what is lost is to deny the flow of life. Tears streamed down Ahote's face as he stepped back, his fists clenched. I will not forget you, he whispered, his voice breaking. But I will let go. The shadows engulfed Wiaka completely, and the figure dissolved into the wind. The plain began to change, the cracks closing, and life slowly returning to the barren soil. Flowers bloomed, and the sky brightened. Ahote knelt, his chest heaving with emotion. But he knew he had passed the second trial, the trial of truth. The third path led to a shimmering pool of water, its surface so still it reflected the sky perfectly. As Ahote approached, the bison's voice returned, softer this time. The final trial lies within. Look into the water and see yourself as you truly are. Ahote hesitated, his reflection staring back at him from the water's surface. Slowly, he knelt and gazed deeper. First, he saw only himself, but the image began to shift. He saw moments from his past, times he had been selfish, times he had doubted, times he had faltered. Each memory struck him like a blow, forcing him to confront the flaws he had tried to bury. You are not perfect, the bison's voice said, but perfection is not required. Only honesty and the willingness to grow. Ahote closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. I accept my flaws, he said softly, and I vow to be better for my people, for the land, and for myself. When he opened his eyes, the reflection had changed. He saw himself standing tall, surrounded by his tribe, the land vibrant and alive once more. The pool shimmered, and the bison appeared behind him, his glowing eyes filled with approval. The trials complete, Ahote found himself back in the stone circle. The bison stood before him, his presence no longer intimidating but comforting. You have faced fear, loss, and truth, the spirit said. You have proven your worth and your dedication to the balance. Go now, and carry my message to your people. As the bison's form began to fade, the land around Ahote transformed. The barren plains gave way to lush grasses. The sky turned a brilliant blue, and a gentle rain began to fall. Ahote felt a surge of energy and clarity, as if the spirit's blessing had filled every fiber of his being. He picked up the medicine pouch, now glowing faintly, and began his journey back to the tribe. The trials had changed him, but his mission was far from over. Unk'itehi's message was clear. The balance could be restored, but only if the tribe embraced their role as stewards of the land and the sacred connection they shared with it. The journey back to the tribe felt both familiar and foreign to Ahote. The Badlands, once ominous and foreboding, now seemed alive with possibility. The air was lighter, the landscape more vibrant, as though the land itself acknowledged the restoration of balance. The rain from Unk'itehi's blessing followed him, soaking into the parched earth and breathing life into the plains. Ahote carried the medicine pouch close to his chest, its faint glow a constant reminder of the trials he had faced and the spirit's message. His heart swelled with determination, yet his thoughts lingered on what lay ahead. How would his people react to the spirit's warning? Would they be willing to change their ways? The answers were uncertain. But Ahote knew he had to try for the tribe, for the land, and for the generations yet to come. As he approached the edge of the tribal encampment, the rain turned into a gentle mist, casting a shimmering veil over the familiar sight of tents and fire pits. The people were gathered in the center, their faces somber and weary. The drought had taken its toll, and hope was a scarce commodity. When they saw Ahote, gasps of surprise and relief rippled through the crowd. Children ran to him, their laughter breaking the heavy silence, while the elders murmured among themselves. Wiaka stepped forward, her frail frame trembling with emotion. Her eyes shone with pride as she embraced her grandson. "You have returned," she said, her voice choked with tears. "The spirits have watched over you." Ahote nodded, his expression serious. "Grandmother, I have seen Unk'itehi. The spirit has spoken, and the path forward is clear. We must act now if we are to restore the balance." The crowd fell silent, their eyes fixed on Ahote as he recounted his journey. He spoke of the trials he had faced, the wolves that tested his fear, the loss he had accepted, and the truths he had confronted. His voice grew steady and strong as he shared the spirit's warning and the responsibility the tribe bore. Unk'itehi has forgiven us," he concluded. "But forgiveness is only the beginning. We must honor our connection to the land, not as conquerors, but as caretakers. The bison will return, the rivers will flow, but only if we walk the path of balance." The elders exchanged glances, their faces a mixture of awe and contemplation. Wiaka stepped forward, her voice firm despite her age. "Ahote speaks the truth. We have strayed from the ways of our ancestors, but it is not too late to make amends. Let us honor the spirits and renew our covenant with the earth." Inspired by her words, the people began to move. They gathered what offerings they could, bundles of sage, feathers, and sacred stones, and made their way to the sacred circle at the heart of the plains. There, under Ahote's guidance, they held a great ceremony, their voices rising in chants that carried across the land. The rain intensified, not as a storm, but as a gentle, life-giving blessing. The dry earth drank deeply, and the air was filled with the scent of renewal. As the tribe danced and prayed, the clouds parted to reveal a brilliant sunset, its golden light bathing the land in warmth. In the days that followed, the changes were undeniable. The bison began to return, their powerful forms once again roaming the plains. The rivers swelled with fresh water, and the grasses grew lush and green. The tribe worked tirelessly to honor their renewed bond with the land, restoring rituals that had been neglected and teaching the younger generation the importance of balance. Ahote's role in the tribe transformed. No longer just a hunter, he became a leader and a guide, his wisdom sought by elders and youth alike. He carried Unk'itehi's message with him always, a reminder of the trials he had faced and the lessons he had learned. One evening, as the tribe gathered around the fire, Wiaka spoke to Ahote, her voice filled with quiet pride. "You have done more than restore the balance. My grandson, you have shown us the strength of the human spirit and the power of faith. The spirits will remember this day, and so will we." Ahote smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun dipped below the endless plains. The journey had tested him in ways he could never have imagined, but it had also revealed a truth that would guide him for the rest of his days. The land and its people were one, bound together by an unbreakable connection. To honor the land was to honor life itself. As the fire crackled and the stars began to fill the sky, Ahote felt a deep sense of peace. Unk'itehi's presence lingered in the whispers of the wind, a quiet assurance that the balance had been restored. And as the tribe's laughter and song echoed into the night, Ahote knew that the future was bright, not just for his people, but for the land they called home. The journey was over, but the story had only just begun.